This is our winter weather outlook, where we're looking at what December, January, and February may hold for Pennsylvania in terms of temperature, precipitation, and snowfall. We're going to be weighing different factors tonight. For that, we'll bring in Pennsylvania State Climatologist Kyle Imhoff and Jon Nese in just a moment. We'll start with you, Kyle. Let's talk about climatology and how the fact that we had a warm October could play a role.
That's right, Rob. So we're going to start off with climatology here, looking at the coldest part of the winter season. That would be in mid to late January for much of Pennsylvania. You see, the only difference is near the lakes, where the lake temperatures are a bit warmer early in the season, so you tend to get your coldest temperatures a bit later than the rest of the state. When we shift gears here to looking at our analog forecast, so looking at years in the past when it was warm in the upper Midwest, which is what we saw this October, the following Decembers and Februarys in those years, it was actually cooler than normal across Pennsylvania. You can see across much of the country that cool signal shows up. When we shift gears here to Pennsylvania specifically, so years when it was warm in Pennsylvania, the following winter season is still cooler than normal, and again, across much of the country, it's that cool signal does show up. So they're both in line there. Now, the interesting thing about this is when you look at the temperature anomalies, if you use a different base period, here we're using 1991 to 2020 normals. If you use the 21st century average, this signal actually changes to a warm signal. So it really matters what you're comparing to when it comes to that long-term average. So cooler than normal temperature seems to be the signal here, Rob.
Interesting that it leans cool using that new period of normals. Thanks for that information, Kyle. Let's switch gears and talk about La Nina. John, it seems like La Nina is something that we can't ignore once again.
Thanks, Rob. Indeed, La Nina is back for an encore. Back-to-back La Ninas. The signal of a La Nina is this ribbon of relatively cool water along the equatorial Pacific. Last year, we used La Nina as an analog. Didn't work out very well, but now we have back-to-back La Ninas. This is what the sea surface temperature anomalies looked like in October of this year. We expect this to continue and perhaps intensify. So how about back-to-back La Ninas? We composited the last 9 times this happened. This was the temperature anomaly. Notice not much going on in Pennsylvania, maybe a bit of a lean towards cooler than average winters, but it's kind of on the fence. Another analog I like this year, Kyle mentioned the warm October. How about a warm October followed by a cool November? This very well may end up happening in Pennsylvania, as so far November has averaged below the long-term mean. Definitely a signal toward cooler than average here in Pennsylvania with a warm October followed by a cool November. One other analog I like, similar Arctic sea ice extent. I found 2 years in the last 20 that are very similar in terms of how much Arctic sea ice there's been the last couple months. The signal here, once again, toward a cooler than average winter. So when you look at these 3 analogs together, it's average to below average temperature-wise. Rob?
Interesting signals in some of those analogs, John and Kyle. Thanks so much for that. Let's take a look at actually a forecast model product. We haven't done that as part of this winter outlook yet. What you're looking at here is the NMME, or the North American Multi-Model Ensemble. This is using a similar base period to what John and Kyle used for their analogs. And you can see everything in orange indicates where temperatures are favored to be above average. And in Pennsylvania's case, it's anywhere from ½ degree to a degree above average for the December, January, and February period here in the Commonwealth. So let's switch gears, though, and take a look at precipitation. Kyle, you've got to look at some Pennsylvania snow climatology and more about precipitation with those other analogs that you showed.
So looking at that climatology in a little more detail, Rob, we're looking at annual winter snowfall across the state. So you see some of the lowest values are in southern and eastern Pennsylvania, where generally you see about 10 to 40 inches of snow. Then you get into the higher elevations in northern and western Pennsylvania, where you have the lake influences, lake effect snow, upwards of 100 inches near Erie. And some of the highest totals across the state are actually in the higher elevations of the Low Highlands, where Laurel Summit gets near 150 inches of snow during the course of a typical winter. Now, we're going back to those analogs we talked about earlier. Remember, the base period here is 1991 to 2020. When we look at warmth in the upper Midwest, what did the following winter look like? You see a bit of a dry signal across the state, with western Pennsylvania seeing the strongest anomalies here when it comes to standard deviations from normal. Now, if we flip this to looking at just at Pennsylvania, warmth during October, you can see that the following winter season, the signal's a little bit mixed here. So you have eastern Pennsylvania with some of the driest anomalies and closer to normal across western Pennsylvania. So a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to precipitation, Rob.
Thanks, Kyle. John, any messages in some of the analogs that you ran with regards to precipitation, at least here in Pennsylvania?
Thanks, Rob. And once again, we'll start with that back-to-back La Nina analog. Pretty strong signal in Pennsylvania. During La Niñas, the subtropical jet stream, which often delivers those strong southern storms that become nor'easters, the subtropical jet tends to be weaker than average during a La Niña, and I think that's why we see this signal of below average precipitation for the December, January, February period in Pennsylvania. How about the analog that had a warm October followed by a cool November? Decidedly a mixed signal in Pennsylvania here. Some slightly above average, some slightly below average. I don't see much of a signal there. And how about that Arctic sea ice similarity signal? Once again in Pennsylvania, although it's flipped with wetter than average west, drier than average east, once again, I think the signal in Pennsylvania is mixed. So from my three analogs anyway, I think the signal leans a little bit dry to about average precipitation. Rob?
And thanks for that analog insight, John and Kyle. What do the forecast models say? Once again, we'll turn to the NMME. It's that blend of a bunch of different models. The signal here for Pennsylvania is also mixed. Favors slightly wetter conditions in the Great Lakes and in western Pennsylvania, and that's picking up on that La Nina signal when you usually have a weaker subtropical jet, so less occurrences of nor'easters and perhaps more frequent occurrences of clippers and cutters moving through portions of the Great Lakes. Putting this all together into our official winter 2021-2022 outlook, we're going to call it near the new norms for December, January, and February in Pennsylvania. In terms of temperature, near to slightly below average, so our statewide temperature anomaly on the order of 0 to maybe 2 degrees below average. Several periods of brief, deep chill, but we're not seeing prolonged stretches of intense cold. For precipitation, slightly below average statewide. The setup does favor a bit wetter in the west versus drier in the east. In terms of snowfall, below average statewide. More lake effect snow than we had last winter, where the lake effect snow machine really didn't get cranking. We think especially active lake effect season starting off in December. And one big snow can make a difference. It's important to note that even though we've had advances in seasonal forecasting, there's still lots of uncertainty, generally low confidence in these outlooks, but it doesn't look like a winter that leans strongly warm or strongly cold here in Pennsylvania. And that will do it for our winter weather outlook. I want to thank Kyle Imhoff and Jon Nese for joining me tonight.
You bet, Rob.
My pleasure, Rob.
And we'll be back in just a moment with more.